All right. Thanks again for joining us on Talent Thrives Here, our evolving podcast where we highlight leaders in business, tech, entertainment, and the arts. My guest today is Ryan Pollreisz, formerly a studio and artist management executive at studios such as Rhythm and Hughes and Sony. Ryan is now CEO and founder of Money Act. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate being on.
All right. Can you give us a brief background of your career? It somewhat mirrors mine a little bit in a sense. There's some similarities. Um,
Yeah,
but it'd be great just to sort of understand a bit of your background, how you got to what you're doing today.
sure. I'll try to be as brief as possible. It's a long roller coaster of a ride, but as this industry is. But yeah, I went to film school in Montana State University, and I moved down to LA to try to get in film. And the actors and writers were on strike right around that time, and so I happened to fall into visual effects. I was a PA on uh, obscure film called Kung Pao Enter the Fist, Steve Odekirk film, and uh, basically running film and back then when it was shot on film and getting it processed and whatnot. And then that I moved over from that to Rhythm and Hughes Studios as a PA on Harry Potter, the very first
Wow.
one. And then I remember that producer just saying, "Oh, you're in the loop now because you're just going to move from film to film." And she was right. It was just kind of moving up the ranks with Rhythm and Hughes from PA to coordinator to asset manager globally when we expanded to 2 studios in India and Malaysia, and then ultimately I was getting to the point where I had a kid in 2008, and my family was in Seattle, and all the industry was moving up to Vancouver, BC. And I just let the studio heads know that I was interested in moving up there if they ever decided to open a branch there. And then in 2011, they said, "Hey, we are going to open a studio there, and do you want to run it?" And I was like, "Absolutely, that sounds amazing." And so I opened Rhythm and Hughes Vancouver in 2011, and then in 2013, uh, the studio went bankrupt within 2 weeks of winning the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects for Life of Pi,
Right.
and that was sort of a major uh, event in the visual effects industry. And uh, basically it was like after a string of bankruptcies, and at that point for myself I was like, I need to diversify. It freaked me out, and I'm like, I need to diversify myself.
Yeah.
Even though I stayed with the company that purchased it out of bankruptcy for about a year,
Mhm.
but I'd still freaked out, so I decided at the time I was sort of like, I hadn't lost my love of movies, but I wasn't like ecstatic anymore about movies. And so I'm like, I don't want to kind of ruin another love of mine. Not that it was completely ruined, but so I'm like, let me just think of something that's just purely about money. And so I'm like, why don't I just learn about money? And so that sort of started my journey in 2013, about, learning about how the money system works, monetary
Yeah.
history, and all that kind of stuff while I was still moving around in the industry. And so I popped around from Rhythm and Hughes. I went over to Deluxe, where I was managing director at Method Studios and Encore. And then that was a brief stint. And then I went over as VP of Artist Management, Recruiting, and Training at Sony ImageWorks. And then the pandemic hit. My wife had a stroke in 2020, so
Wow.
there's a lot of major events that happened in 2020 personally. And by end of 2021, I kind of decided, based off of the medical we were getting, that, and we could see what we could get back in the US, we decided to I decided to open my options. As far as, I never really took interviews, but I had some people reaching out, and so I
Mhm.
started taking interviews in back in the U.S. and this gaming position opened up, so I moved to gaming in Orange County in very beginning of 2022,
Mhm.
and then recently that studio had its funding pulled. And so now I'm doing my side hustle, which is this Money Act business, which is now
Right.
my main hustle.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I wanted to add a personal comment for a second when you were talking about getting into money and understanding money. And,
Oh, yeah.
I remember being on a plane once as a young man, and I was talking to this guy next to me on the plane, and he had been a surgeon for years. And he said,
Uh-huh.
I got out of being a surgeon. I'm like, well, you studied for like so many years to become a surgeon.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, but I found a lot of people are just in it for the money. And I kind of wanted to save lives and look after people. And I
Right.
found that
A good
I was
doctor.
surrounded by people who were just in it for the money. So
Oh,
he
wow.
said that really soured me, and I left it. I said, "What do you do now?" He goes, "I'm a stockbroker now." I
That's
just remember
hilarious.
looking like,
That's
what?
hilarious. Well, the
Yeah,
interesting thing about when I took this deep dive into money, and then ultimately in 2019 was end of 2019 is the first time I really kind of came up with the idea of merging movies and money,
yeah,
having been a producer and you deal with a lot of money at that point. So
yeah,
I'm like, duh, this makes sense.
yeah,
It, interestingly, working on this business, it's sparked my love of movies again because now
right.
I'm doing
Cool.
it from not I'm doing it from an audience perspective, trying to merge them versus, looking at, oh, I can tell that that's a green screen, or I can tell that where you
Yeah,
start really picking a movie apart, you could
yeah,
start looking at them for the fun of it again. And so that, and I've been doing these little skits with my son where I composite myself into a
yeah, right.
famous scene, and that seemed to really pique an interest with people. But those have been a lot of fun to do, and it kind of takes
Yeah,
me back to why I got into it in the first place,
sure,
because
sure.
my best friend in high school and I used to make these ninja movies with my parents' big old camcorder,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and it kind of just took me back to my roots, so that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'd like to find, we used to shoot on Super 8 somewhere.
But
All
yeah.
through high school, we made a lot of films and stuff. But so
Yeah.
I'm curious though, let's gravitate to Money Act. Tell us
Yeah.
exactly, not only for my interest, but anyone watching, like, what is it? How does it work? Give us the components of it. And if I was interested, or who is your target market?
Yeah, I mean, my target market is pretty much anyone in their early 20s, maybe even in college, all the way through to 60s, because it's really about what was opened in my eyes about how the money system really works and how we're sort of fed these horrible ideas like 401ks or RSPs if you're in Canada,
Yep.
where you lock your money up, you can't touch it until you're 65 or older,
Yeah.
and then you're taxed on it like regular income. And so
Yeah.
you plan on being poor because you plan on having less of an income, and
Yeah.
hopefully your house is paid off or whatever it is. So you're planning on being poor so that your tax hit is less because you're
Yep.
still getting taxed at the end. And so we're all fed these ideas of how we should retire. Most people don't, which is sad.
Hmm.
And um, and then once you dive into the concepts of everything, you realize money is literally just printed out of thin air. So why would you save this thing that somebody else can counterfeit into existence?
Hmm.
So what I do is I basically take all these normally boring topics like money, because
Yeah.
I have to admit, I didn't want anything to do. I handed my money over to a financial advisor. I'm like, this is boring. I remember my grandpa, he owned a busing company in Montana, and he, right when I started running Rhythm and Hughes, he asked me if I ever wanted to do my own business. And at the time, this was before the bankruptcy, I told him, I'm just not a business guy. I'm an artist. I don't want to deal with any of that kind of stuff, and
Sure.
not realizing I'm running somebody else's business.
Right.
so, um, so I was totally there. I thought the subject of money was boring. And so my idea is to make it fun,
Sure.
tie it in with movies. And so what I do is I have a bunch of freebies I hand out, like this book that I just recently released,
Yeah.
which people can go to money-act.com, and you can click on free ebook and you'll get access to that book if you
Cool.
want it. Um, but I give away freebies, and then eventually, if people like what they see and they're having fun learning about these new ideas, I take a lot of things from Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
If anybody's read that book, a lot of concepts from big economists like Thomas Sowell, Jim Rickards, Peter Schiff, a lot of these big guys, and I just kind of put it into something fun,
Yeah.
whether it's how to budget like a Hollywood producer. And I take some of the techniques as a producer. I take screenwriter techniques to find who you are as a character in your own movie,
Hmm.
because a lot of people don't understand what their goal is in
Sure.
life or what their goal is just this year or 5 years from now. And so you
Yeah.
use screenwriter techniques to find out what exactly it is that you want. And it sounds cheesy, just that one thing, but I have to say it was something that when I put myself through it, it actually increased my income because I now had somewhere to go, because
Right.
you can't
Right.
get to somewhere unless you don't know where it is you want to go.
Yep.
And so there's things like that. Then, and it's actually a 3-act structure, my main big course that I give to people. And the second act is a lot about how to velocity of money, turning $1 into $2, $3, or $4 or more, and just kind of keep that money moving around, because the more it moves around, the more your income grows. And it's all about residuals, just like in
Hmm.
Hollywood, everything's
Right.
about residuals. You want to work on residual income, because if you can replace your expenses with residual income producing assets,
Yeah.
then you don't have to think about how much do I need in retirement? Is it 1 million, 2 million? Nobody
Right.
knows how long they're going to live. They don't know how much taxes are going to be. They're obviously going to go up because they always go up.
Hmm.
They don't know how much inflation is going to eat away at how much they've
Sure.
saved. So there's all these things that I just take the guesswork out of that. You just end up purchasing residual income producing assets to replace your expenses.
Gotcha.
So I teach people how to do that. And then I have a community. So once you say, yes, I want to go into your courses, you're plugged into a community where it's part of a whole bunch of different Discord channels.
Hmm.
And depending on what you wanted to learn about, you can have access to each of these Discord channels.
Hmm.
And the people start, because I'm part of other investment groups as well. What it does is people say, hey, we all are learning the same thing together. And some of us have been learning it for a while, some of us haven't. And so it's a way for people to ask questions
Right.
from their peers. It's a way for people to say, hey, I found this other investment that fits within the Moneyball system, or I found this system or this investment that fits within this thing that Ryan talks about.
Yeah.
And then I also do video calls with the community and let
Cool.
them ask questions directly to me. And
Yeah.
a lot of people have their own personal, experiences that they have. And I record those, put those on as for the community to go back to if they couldn't make the event or whatever it is. So
Cool.
that's kind of it in a nutshell. But it's really fun. It's been a lot of fun putting it together.
Excellent. And I'm just curious, does some of it tie back to your film? Because we talked
Yeah.
before about the sort of in the film business, people get siloed, like, accounting and finances down that end of the hall, and creatives out there on the floor, and there's like a huge bit of gravity or geography between the two, right? Like
Right.
and so creative folks or development folks, they don't always understand the mechanics that are going into financing a film, a TV show, any of those sort of things.
That's right.
And you've lived it, you've seen it, I've seen it too, and it's always interesting. I'm working on a few projects right now for some of my clients. We're waiting for the money to drop into the bank account so we can start recruiting.
Right.
Um, but that money goes through a convoluted kind of train to get to that bank account, right?
Right.
Or it doesn't all come at once, it comes in installments and so on. So I'm just curious, from, being around the film business for so long, are you able to, in what you're doing, appeal to potentially, I guess, anybody out there, but are you specifically focusing on people who are interested in film and animation and so on and gaming, or is it not really a requirement?
It's not a requirement. So anyone really who loves films can, and wants to learn about money can join.
Sure.
I obviously my focus is our industry because that's the people I know. So
Yeah.
my initial leads are people that I know, and
Yeah.
so I can easily tap into that
Right.
group. And so most of my followers are in the film industry, but I do have a lot of people now with this YouTube channel that I've
Yeah.
got. It's recently, doing these skits and highlighting different things in the film industry or in money.
Yeah.
It's built the audience up because now you're getting other people
Sure.
looking at these skits or whatever I'm doing and then joining and seeing what it's all about. So my hope is that I will grow outside of the industry, but I do, I have a love for this industry. I was a talent person like you, always working with the artists
Yeah.
throughout my whole career. And so I love the community, and I'm hoping this is a way for them to it's a way for me to sort of give back in a way, but also to still be connected with them. And
Yeah.
especially in this community that I've already got, it's a little over 10, 11 or 12 people right now. So it's very beginning. I've just started it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but it's fun to connect with people that I used to work with. Most of them I used to work with,
Yeah.
and see their growth.
Right.
And it's really fun to see, like, hey, I just increased my residual income by $1,000 a month,
Wow.
and and just seeing all these little wins right
Yeah.
now, and it's
Yeah.
just the beginning. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Excellent. Well, I forgot to mention earlier too. This is part two. We as you know, Ryan, we did
Right.
a
Yes.
reverse of the roles on your podcast, and so
That's
this
right.
is part deux to the to the show.
That's right.
And people can find you back on your podcast as well.
That's
Um,
right.
but and I'd really love to see, maybe we connect again in another 6 months and see if your community is now, 50, 60, a couple hundred, how big it gets,
Yeah.
and talk about some of the wins and some of the hurdles, because I love getting into seeing how new businesses start and
Hmm.
some of the challenges, because sometimes it's operational or it's financial. Sometimes it's a mindset thing as well, right? Sometimes it's like,
Right.
I never thought about that and I had to give up on, like, even my own business. There's
Totally.
things that I've had to sort of say, I'm no longer the lead recruiter. I can have the recruiters do that. But sometimes for senior roles, I'm like, no, I have to do this. And now, so it's,
Right.
as an entrepreneur, sometimes you're like, you've got your hands on it. You don't really need to have, once you've got a crew around you or an ecosystem, right? Maybe you build
Yeah.
up to a point where some of the people in your initial group become trainers. And,
Totally.
so
Yeah.
now you've got a tier where they're talking to the trainers, not some, you don't have to micromanage every single part of your business. And I've
That's
seen
right.
that in some coaching programs where, um, I was in one years ago where they had 200 some odd people in it, and
Yeah.
there was no way the guy that started that could run it. So he eventually had a tier of managers, and each one had a specific role.
Right.
And then they were able to scale. At one point, he had over 600 or 700 people signed up, and then they were breaking out into
Nice.
different modules during the week because the the Zoom calls
Yeah. The one
just
person can't
crashed.
handle it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Right.
you know. And then he had tiers, and so it's. But I think the benefit of this time that we're living in is there's so much of this technology available
Oh
to
yeah.
us now.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you
Well, the
couldn't have done this
interesting thing
before.
too is on that topic is how it kind of spawns off into different things. Like already in my community, I'm talking to one person that there may be another separate business opportunity that's sort of tangential in a way,
Yeah,
but it's like, oh, that could be cool. And it could be a way too, where we're also actually have a meeting tomorrow with some filmmakers. I invested in their film last year, but
yeah,
we're talking about expanding it and sort of scaling it. And what if
sure.
I could bring what they've created for small investors to invest in a film? What if
Fantastic.
we can bring that to my community?
Yeah,
And now we have my system, but now you can actually invest in films or games
yeah,
or whatever it may be. So it's really cool how, once you start building a community of people, it just kind of spawns off into new opportunities for
yeah.
everybody.
Cool.
Yeah,
Excellent. Well, look, I'm conscious of the time. I want to sort of wrap up, and hopefully we can connect again at a later date. I'd
absolutely.
love to see the evolution of what's going on, and also, it's a strange time going that there's a actor strike still on and this sort of thing in Hollywood. So I think
Yeah.
things could be a lot different in 6 months. But I really thank you, Ryan, for coming on the program today and telling us all about what you're doing. And
Thanks for
you know,
having me, Lance. This was a lot of fun.
you're welcome. And could you just give them again one more? How do they find you again? I know that they can find Ryan Pollreisz on
On LinkedIn or
LinkedIn.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I've actually got two LinkedIn accounts. So one is my film business one, and one is my Money Act
Money
one.
Act.
So, but you can find me at money-act.com. You need the dash in there, money-act.com.
Excellent.
And you'll be able to check out what I've got going on there.
Excellent. Thanks again. Pleasure.
Also, I'm on YouTube, so if you want to click
right.
on the other channel, the part one, you can check out my YouTube channel over there.
Excellent. Thanks
And don't
again.
forget to like and subscribe Lance's and
there you
mine.
go.
It helps the
Thanks.
algorithm so that it goes out to other people.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. Take
All
care.
right.
We'll see you soon.
All right. Take care, Lance. Thank you. See ya.